My mom faked her own robbery and used me as her alibi. I lied for her once. Then I found the pawn shop receipt and everything changed. My name's Dana, I'm 29, I work nights in the ER at a hospital 40 minutes from where I grew up, and until about 4 months ago, I would have told you my mother was overbearing but harmless. A lot of people have a mom like that. The kind who calls twice a day, who has opinions about your haircut, who still keeps a key to your apartment, just in case. I loved her. I still do, actually, which is the part that makes this whole thing so hard to talk about. I didn't know it yet, but the night my mother called me sobbing about a break-in would end with her in a county holding cell, and me being the one who put her there. So, buckle up. I guess I should back up first, though, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what my mother is actually like, and what she means when she uses the word loyalty. My dad died when I was 16. Heart attack, sudden, no warning, the kind of thing that reorganizes your whole understanding of how safe the world is. My mother, Linda, was 39 at the time, and she did not handle it by falling apart in the normal ways people fall apart. She handled it by deciding that the only thing standing between her and total collapse was knowing, with total certainty, exactly who she could count on. And the way she found out who she could count on was by testing people. Constantly. For the rest of her life, as it turns out. It started small enough that for years I didn't even clock it as a pattern. I just thought my mom was intense. When I was 17, she called me at a friend's house at 11 at night saying she thought someone was in the backyard and she needed me home right now. I left the sleepover, drove home in a panic, and found her sitting calmly at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching for my headlights. I just wanted to see how fast you'd come, she told me. Not sorry. Almost proud. When I was 22, in my first semester of nursing school, she called saying she'd fallen down the stairs and couldn't get up. I skipped a clinical rotation exam, an exam I'd studied for 6 weeks, and drove 90 minutes with my heart in my throat, only to find her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, completely fine. I wanted to see if school came before family, she said. I failed to reschedule that exam in time and had to retake the whole rotation the following semester. My brother Jason got his own versions of this. Fake job offers she'd float past him to see if he'd move away and abandon her. A fake diagnosis once, she told him she had a shadow on a mammogram, let him spiral in fear for 4 days, then revealed it was a misread, just to see, she said, if you'd actually show up for me or just send flowers like your father's side of the family does. Jason, for what it's worth, handled all of this by giving her exactly what she wanted every single time, no questions, no pushback. He's 32 now, still lives 20 minutes from her, still drops everything whenever she calls. I used to think that made him the good child and me the skeptical one. I don't think that anymore. I think it made him easier to use. I want to be fair to her, though, because that's important to this kind of story. Nobody's a cartoon villain, and my mother genuinely believes, I think, that what she does comes from love. She lost my dad with 0 warning. She has told me more than once, with real tears in her eyes, that she cannot survive finding out someone she trusted wasn't there for her, not again, not after him. In her mind, the tests aren't cruelty. They're due diligence. She's building a list of people who will not disappear on her the way my father did, involuntarily, without meaning to. It's twisted, but it's not nothing. I want you to hold that thought, because it matters later. By the time I was an adult with my own apartment and my own job, I'd learned to recognize her tests fast enough that most of them didn't cost me much anymore. A weird urgent call, a strange inconsistency in her story, a demand that felt just slightly too specific, I'd learned the shape of it. I thought I was good at spotting them. I was wrong about that too. This one didn't feel like a test at all. This one felt real. That was the whole design. It was a Tuesday in March, close to midnight, and I was 3 hours into a night shift when my phone lit up with her name. I almost let it go to voicemail. We get slammed on Tuesdays for some reason nobody's ever explained to me, but something made me step into the break room and pick up. She was sobbing. Not fake crying sobbing, the way she sometimes did for effect. This sounded ragged, out of breath, real. Dana, someone broke into the house. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Mom, are you hurt? Are you safe right now? I'm okay. I was at Carol's. I just got home and the back door's busted and the safe's open and Dana, they took your grandmother's ring. They took the good silver. I don't even know what else yet. I haven't called the police yet. I called you first. I didn't know what to. Mom, hang up and call 911 right now. I mean it. Right now. Okay. I'll call them. Just can you come? I don't want to be here alone when they... I'm working, Mom. I can't leave in the middle of a shift, but I'll come the second I'm off, I promise. Call the police. Text me the second they're there. I want to be honest about something. Even in that moment, some old, tired part of my brain registered a flicker of, is this real? That's how conditioned I'd gotten. And I hated myself a little for it, because what kind of daughter has that thought while her mother is crying about a home invasion? So I shut the thought down hard. I told myself I was being paranoid and cynical because of years of manufactured emergencies, and that this time, statistically, eventually, something was bound to be real. Robberies happen. Sometimes the boy who cried wolf is telling the truth. She texted 20 minutes later. * police here. Detective coming tomorrow to do report properly, officer says. I'm okay. Scared. Can you come in the morning? *. I got off shift at 7 a.m., drove straight to her house without sleeping, and found her sitting on the porch steps in a bathrobe, looking small and pale in a way that punched a hole clean through my chest. The back door had a splintered frame around the lock. Her jewelry box in the bedroom was overturned. The little floor safe in the closet, the one my dad installed years ago, stood open and empty. They took the ring, she said again, and this time when she cried, I believed every part of it. I held her on the porch for a long time. Here's where I have to slow down, because this is the part of the story where, if you'd been living it with me in real time, you'd have started noticing what I only pieced together weeks later. The detective, a guy named Ruiz, mid-40s, tired eyes, the kind of calm, unhurried voice that I now understand is a professional tool and not just a personality, came by that afternoon to walk through the scene and take statements. My mother gave hers. She'd been at her friend Carol's from 6 to 11, playing cards, came home a little after 11, found the door forced and the safe emptied. Carol, when Ruiz called her to confirm, backed up the timeline mostly. Carol said Mom had left sometime around 10:30, maybe closer to 11, which was vague enough not to raise flags on its own, but which I remember later as the first crack in the foundation. Then Ruiz turned to me and asked when I'd last spoken to my mother before the incident. And this is the part I'm not proud of. Because right before he asked that question, my mother had caught my eye, just for half a second, a look I knew from 100 childhood moments, a look that meant help me here, and she said, quickly, casually, like she was just making conversation, Dana, wasn't it around 10 that we were on the phone? You'd called about that shift swap. We had not spoken at 10. We hadn't spoken at all that day until her midnight call. But she said it so smoothly, so confidently, in front of a detective, with her eyes on mine, and every instinct I had, every year of training that being loyal to my mother meant showing up, backing her up, not embarrassing her, kicked in before I could think it through. Yeah, I said. Around then. Ruiz wrote it down. Didn't blink. Moved on to the next question. I told myself, driving home that night, that it was a small thing. A white lie to smooth over a detail that didn't matter, because who cares what time she talked to her daughter on a day her house got robbed? It wasn't like I was lying about who did it. I was just covering an unimportant gap. That's what I told myself. It didn't feel unimportant a week later. The following weekend, Jason and I were at Mom's house helping her sort out what was missing for the insurance claim. This is a normal thing, apparently. When you've been robbed, you sit with a claims adjuster and an itemized list and you try to remember, in granular detail, everything you own that's suddenly gone. Grandma's ring, appraised 18 months ago for insurance purposes at $6,200. The silver set, another few thousand. Some cash she said she kept in the safe for emergencies, about $1,800, no receipts of course, because who keeps a receipt for cash? Jason was helping her fill out forms at the kitchen table, and I was in the hallway when I noticed something small, a little white dome mounted up near the ceiling. tucked behind the crown molding where you wouldn't clock it unless you were looking straight up at exactly the right angle. A security camera. One I had never in my life seen before, and my mother is not, historically, a person who invests in home security. She's the type who still calls the microwave clock that flashing 12 o'clock thing because she's never learned to set it. I asked her about it, keeping my voice light. "Since when do you have cameras?" She waved a hand. "Oh, your Uncle Pete put a couple in last year," said the neighborhood's gone downhill. I forgot they were even there, honestly. Reasonable enough answer. Except when Ruiz followed up 2 days later, because apparently detectives do follow up, contrary to what I thought from television, where cases seem to resolve in 44 minutes. He asked her directly whether she had any security footage of the break-in. And she said no. She said the cameras had been broken for months, batteries dead, on my list to replace. Never got around to it. But I'd seen the little red light blinking under that dome with my own eyes, 2 days before that conversation. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. A blinking light on a device could mean anything, I told myself. Low battery warning, whatever. Except a dead camera doesn't blink red. A dead camera does nothing at all. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I told myself I must be misremembering the color or the placement or something. I want to be honest that a big part of me did not want to pull that thread, because pulling it meant admitting what it might unravel. This next part is the one that actually broke it open, and it happened almost by accident. My mother, God bless her, does not understand technology, and she does not understand that when you hand your teenage niece your old phone to wipe and give to your cousin, that teenage niece, my cousin Emily, 17, sharp as a tack, bored out of her mind during her spring break, is going to poke through it first out of simple curiosity before she does the factory reset. Emily called me, not Mom, not Jason, because Emily and I have always been close, and because, her words, this felt weird and I didn't know what to do with it. There was a text thread on that old phone from 6 weeks before the robbery, between my mother and a number saved as D. Gold and Pawn. The messages were short and businesslike. My mother had asked about the value of a diamond ring, antique setting, appraisal available. The reply quoted a number. 3 days later, another text, bringing it in Thursday afternoon. "Thanks for working with me on this." The robbery happened on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after that exchange. Emily, bless her genuinely, sent me screenshots and said, "This is probably nothing, right?" Like maybe she was just curious what it was worth. And I told her that, sure, probably nothing, thanks for sending it. Don't worry about it. The way you calm a 17-year-old down when your own hands are shaking too hard to type properly. I drove to the pawn shop myself 2 days later. I told the guy behind the counter I was trying to track down a family ring that might have been sold there by mistake, gave a description, antique setting, a specific inscription inside the band that only our family would know. 3 small diamonds flanking a larger center stone. He didn't want to give me details at first, understandably, store policy. But when I explained I had reason to believe it might be tied to a police report, he got quiet, checked his system, and told me off the record, he said. And I believe he was doing me a favor by saying anything at all, that a ring matching that description had come in about 6 weeks prior, sold outright, not pawned, meaning there was no ticket to redeem it later. Sold by a woman he described well enough that there was no ambiguity about who it was. I sat in my car in that parking lot for probably 20 minutes before I could drive. I want to tell you that I confronted her immediately, righteous and clear-eyed, but that's not what happened. What happened is I drove to her house, sat in her kitchen, and for almost 2 hours talked about nothing: the weather, Jason's new girlfriend, whether she should replant the tomatoes this year. While some coward part of my brain kept looking for a way this could still be innocent. Maybe she sold a different ring. Maybe the pawn shop guy was wrong. Maybe. Finally, I just said it. "Mom, did you sell Grandma's ring before the robbery?" She didn't flinch the way I expected. That was almost the worst part. She didn't even try very hard to look surprised. She set down her coffee cup very carefully, like she'd been waiting for this conversation, maybe even wanted it. "I did," she said. "Then there was no robbery." My voice came out flatter than I felt. "There was a robbery," she said. I paid Carol's nephew $200 to break the door frame and mess up the bedroom. He didn't take anything, because there wasn't anything real left to take by then. I'd already sold what mattered. I actually laughed, one of those horrible, involuntary laughs that comes out when your brain can't process what it's hearing. You paid someone to fake break into your own house. I needed the insurance money, she said, like she was explaining a household budgeting decision. Your father's pension isn't what it used to be after the market did what it did last year, and I didn't want to ask you kids for help, and I didn't want to sell the ring outright and just lose it, have people ask where it went. This way I get the insurance payout for the ring's full value. I already have the cash from selling it separately, and nobody has to know I'm struggling. Mom, that's insurance fraud. That's a crime. Do you understand that's an actual felony? I understand it's a felony if someone tells, she said, and there was something in her tone right then, something almost testing, almost expectant, that made the hair on my arms stand up before she even said the next part out loud. Which is sort of the point, Dana. I needed to know. I've needed to know for years, honestly, whether you'd actually protect me if it mattered, or whether you're one of those people who'll love me right up until it costs you something. And there it was. The whole thing laid bare. It wasn't really about the money, or it wasn't only about the money. My mother had built an actual criminal insurance fraud scheme involving actual damage to her own home and a real financial claim to a real insurance company, and folded her own daughter into providing a false alibi to a police detective, and she'd done it, at least in part, as a loyalty test. The biggest one yet. The one she'd apparently been building toward her whole life, since I was 17, and she wanted to see how fast I'd come running for a fake intruder in the backyard. You already lied for me once, she said, gently, almost kindly, like she was giving me credit for something. To the detective. About the phone call. You did that without even thinking about it. That's what I needed to see. I want to tell you I said something powerful in that moment. I didn't. I sat there feeling sick, feeling like the floor of my own life had quietly been replaced with something rotten sometime in the last 6 weeks without my noticing, and I said, I need to go, and I left. I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. I want to walk you through what that felt like, because I think it's the part of this story that actually matters more than the plot mechanics of who did what. Because here's the thing, I understood her logic. That's the horrifying part. I understood, in some twisted way, why she'd done it, why the fear of abandonment my father's death planted in her had grown into this need to manufacture crises specifically so she could measure, in real time, exactly how loved she was. I even understood, God help me, why part of me had gone along with the small lie to Ruiz without thinking twice. 29 years of training will do that to a person. But understanding it didn't make it okay. And it definitely didn't make it something I could keep participating in. Because here's what I kept circling back to at 3 a.m, staring at my ceiling. If I said nothing, I wasn't just protecting my mother's feelings anymore. I was an accessory, in fact if not yet in name, to a completed insurance fraud that had already been filed and was, as far as I knew, sitting in a queue somewhere waiting to be paid out by a company that would be paying real money based on a real lie that I had already, once, personally corroborated to a police officer. If that claim got paid, and it came out later, and things like this do come out, I was starting to understand, because sloppy fraud always leaves a trail somewhere, a pawn shop receipt, a teenager with a hand-me-down phone, a camera that blinks red when it's supposedly dead. I would not just be the daughter of a woman who committed fraud. I would be someone who knew, who'd been told directly by the person who did it, and who'd sat on it. That's not a moral gray area anymore. That's obstruction, or at minimum it's the kind of thing that ends a nursing license fast if it ever surfaced that I'd known and done nothing, given how much of my job involves being trusted with things that matter. I also kept thinking about Jason. About whether he knew. I called him the next morning, careful, feeling my way through the conversation, and it became clear fast that he didn't. He was as blindsided as I'd been, and when I told him what I'd found, he went quiet in a way that told me he believed me immediately. No argument, which told me something too, about how not shocking this was, underneath everything, to either of us. So what do? He asked. I think I have to tell Ruiz. Dana. She's our mother. I know. You'll destroy her. You understand that, right? This isn't a slap on the wrist, insurance fraud, false police report. She could actually go to jail for this. I know that too. Then why? Because she already made her choice, Jason. She chose to build a crime and hand me a piece of it without asking whether I wanted it. She didn't test my loyalty. She used it. There's a difference, and I don't think I understood the difference until right now. He didn't agree with me on that call. I want to be honest about that, because it matters for what happened after. He thought, still thinks, actually, some of the time, that family loyalty means silence no matter what, that whatever she's done, she's still mom, still the person who raised us, and that turning her in was a betrayal bigger than anything she'd ever done to either of us. I don't think he's a bad person for believing that. I think he's still, in a lot of ways, the kid who always came running. I don't blame him for it. I just couldn't be that person anymore, not this time. I sat with the decision for 4 more days before I called Ruiz. I want to be honest that part of the delay was cowardice, and part of it was making sure I understood exactly what I was about to set in motion, because once you tell a detective something like this, you can't pull it back. I met him at the precinct, not over the phone, because I wanted to say it to a person, not a recorded line. I told him everything. The pawn shop texts Emily had found, my own visit to the pawn shop, and what the clerk had told me off the record, and, hardest part, that I had, in fact, corroborated a false timeline for my mother during his initial interview, and that the 10 p.m. phone call I'd confirmed had never happened. He didn't react the way I expected. No anger, no triumph, nothing dramatic. Just that same tired, calm voice. I appreciate you coming in, he said. This corrects something in the file that needed correcting. I want to be straight with you, though, depending on how the DA's office wants to handle it, your initial statement could be its own issue. I can't promise you there won't be follow-up on that. I understand, I said. And I did. I'd thought about that part plenty during those 4 sleepless nights. I decided I'd rather face whatever came from my own small lie honestly than keep compounding it by staying quiet about the much bigger one. The investigation moved faster after that than I expected. The pawn shop had records, a receipt, a signature, a security camera still from their own front counter, because pawn shops, it turns out, are required to keep pretty thorough documentation for exactly this reason. Carol's nephew, the one paid $200 to break the door frame, turned out to not be nearly as loyal as my mother had assumed, because the moment a detective sat across from him, he told the whole thing in about 4 minutes flat, cash payment and all, in exchange for what his lawyer later called consideration, which I gather means he didn't get charged with anything himself for his part, since he cooperated fast and fully. 3 weeks after I sat down with Ruiz, my mother was arrested at her home, in the middle of the afternoon, for insurance fraud and filing a false police report. I wasn't there. Jason called me from the driveway, his voice shaking, and told me she'd looked right at him as they walked her out and said, "Tell your sister I hope it was worth it." I sat with that sentence for a long time. I want to slow down here, because I think this is the part of the story people either really understand or really don't, and I don't think there's a clean, satisfying way through it, and honestly, I've stopped trying to find one. I visited her once, about 3 weeks after the arraignment, at the county facility where she was being held while awaiting trial. Bail had been set, but nobody in the family had the cash on hand to post it, and I'll admit that some part of me, quietly, without saying it to anyone, didn't fight very hard to help change that. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, in a jumpsuit that didn't fit right, and for about 30 seconds I almost lost my nerve and just told her I loved her and left it at that. Instead, she spoke first. "I need you to understand," she said, "that I never thought it would go this far. I thought maybe a fine. I didn't think. You committed a felony, Mom. You paid someone to damage your own house and lied to a detective's face, and you tried to make me lie too, without asking, without warning, just to see if I would. Because I needed to know," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that still, even now, gets to me a little, because some part of that crack was real. "Your father left without warning me. I have spent 13 years terrified that everyone I love is one phone call away from disappearing on me the same way, and I could not keep living not knowing which of my children would actually stay." "You could have just asked me," I said. You could have told me you were scared about money. You could have told me you needed to feel like I'd choose you. I would have told you the truth, which is that I would. I didn't need a felony wrapped around the question to answer it. She didn't have anything to say to that. I think, for the first time in longer than I can remember, my mother genuinely didn't have a reply prepared. I'm not visiting again for a while, I told her, and I meant it gently, not as a punishment, though I understood she might hear it that way. I love you. I'm going to keep loving you. But I'm not going to keep proving it to you by breaking rules or lying for you every time you decide you need reassurance. That's not loyalty. That's just you using me to feel better, and I can't keep doing that and also be a person with my own life. She cried. I cried too, honestly, in the parking lot afterward, sitting in my car for a long time before I trusted myself to drive. Where things stand now, her case hasn't gone to trial yet. These things move slowly, I've learned. Much slower than television makes it look, but her public defender has floated a plea arrangement that would likely mean a reduced charge, restitution to the insurance company, and probation rather than serving significant time, given it's a first offense and the dollar amount, while not nothing, isn't enormous by the standards of these cases. I don't know yet whether she'll take it. Jason still visits every week and still, some days, tells me I overreacted, that family doesn't turn family in, that I could have found another way. Some days I wonder if he's right. Most days I don't. What I keep coming back to, when people ask me if I regret it, is this. My mother spent almost my entire adult life testing whether I'd show up for her no matter what she asked of me. And the answer, it turns out, was more complicated than either of us expected. I would show up for her at midnight for a robbery that turned out to be real damage from a fake crime. I would hold her on a porch step and believe every tear. I would even, God help me, tell one small lie to a detective before I fully understood what I was covering for. But I wouldn't keep doing it once I understood what it actually was. And I think, in the end, that's the answer to her real question, the one underneath all the fake emergencies and staged break-ins and manufactured crises going back 13 years. She always wanted to know if I'd stay loyal no matter what. I would. I have. I still call her, still send her money for her commissary account, still plan to show up for whatever comes next in this process, plea deal or trial, because she's still my mother, and I don't think that stops being true just because she did something terrible. But loyalty was never supposed to mean doing whatever she asked without asking why. I understand that now in a way I didn't before all of this. And if that means I'm the daughter who finally failed one of her tests, the first one I ever failed, all the way, then I think, for the first time in my life, that might actually be the right answer. Update, for anyone wondering, the insurance company has confirmed they never actually paid out the claim. It was still in review when I went to Ruiz, which apparently helps her case somewhat, since no funds were disbursed based on the fraud. Small mercy. Doesn't undo the false report, or the door frame, or the ring that's gone for good now, sold to a stranger for a fraction of what it was worth to our family. But it's something. I'll update again once we know what happens with the plea. Which side of that story were you on? Let me know in the comments. And if you love diving into these Reddit rabbit holes with me, subscribe to Reddit Be Mine. We're building the best storytelling community on YouTube, and we'd love to have you. Click that sub button and stay tuned.